Hey, everybody. Happy Saturday. So, in this video, I'm going to talk about something I think of as cognitive pop flies or cognitive function pop flies. And I'll get into why I call it that in a second. But it's sort of a response video to a video posted by a friend of the channel, Shane Starr. And it's cool to see he's active again, making videos. I linked um, his video down below, so check that out if you get a chance. But one of the things he's talking about, and you can tell he spends a lot of time evaluating all the different systems and all the different explanations, and everybody sort of getting at the same thing, but not really, and in their own little ways. And he's either an ISTJ or an ESTJ. I think that's kind of a jump ball, but either way, he's definitely looking for like a very systematic approach. Like, look, is there a simple formula that we could just all agree to, that you just plug in the numbers into the variables, and the answer pops out. And of course, that's what we're always looking for when we've got some sort of system, quote unquote, that where we're trying to describe some phenomenon like typology. And yeah, I think that would be great if we had it. But I think there's maybe another way of thinking about it, and maybe getting a little bit more comfortable with sort of the chaos of it all. Um, and, and so this brings me to my analogy, the pop fly analogy. So I think about when I was a kid and I played baseball, and they would hit us pop flies in practice, right? And I'm assuming most people watching this know what a pop fly is, but if you don't, it's when they hit the ball and it goes up really high, and you, as the outfielder or whatever, are standing there waiting for it to come down and catch it. Okay. And when you're a little kid and the ball goes really high, that feels like forever. At least if you're, not like a primary SE dominant type, I would argue. And a lot is going through your mind as this ball is coming down. And it's a relatively simple thing to do, to catch a pop fly, except your mind gets in the way, your head gets in the way, right? And if you're you know, SE is sort of an inferior function for you, or not developed at all as a little kid, um, there's going to be a lot going through your mind, right? And you're going to be thinking of all these FE type things, maybe like, oh my God, everybody's going to laugh at me, or oh my God, they're going to cut me from the team if I don't catch this ball, or oh my God, it's going to hit me in the face, or something like that. And, again, we catch balls all the time, even as little kids. It's relatively simple. It's just the fact that you have so much time to think about it while it's coming down, that all you can do is think of like, these sort of what if scenarios, in something going bad, right? So, point being is that, if you're a dominant SE type, I would argue you probably are a little bit more focused on the here and now and the physical, what's going on, and probably feel a little bit more comfortable with catching the pop fly, right? Like my kid, he's got SE either first or second, and he's never had a problem with that kind of stuff. Once he was coordinated enough, I would ask him, like, do you, are there things going through your head? And he's just like, no, I'm just focused on catching the ball. Um, and so a very different experience, right? Than what I had when I was a kid. So, so the point is that when you're thinking about the cognitive functions and all that, I think it's easiest to think about it in computate, like the domain specific terms, right? What is your brain computing? What is it focused on? Where is your attention focused? either outside or inside, in your mind. And when you think of sort of the stacking or the quote unquote preferences of your cognitive functions, you want to think of, okay, how easy is it to stay in that domain, right? So if you're a lead SE and you've got a pop fly coming to you, it's pretty easy, I think, for them to just stay focused on the task, right? Their brain isn't like going in different areas, like FE areas or TI areas or SI areas, like they're just focused. And for whatever reason, their brain is just wired in that way. So they can stay in that domain without having a whole lot of trouble. Those of us who aren't SE dominant and, it's sort of lower down on the totem pole, I think it's harder for us to stay focused, right? So yeah, we can catch a ball, we can use SE, but the more we have to sort of stay focused as the ball is slowly coming down from however high it was, it's harder to sort of stay in that domain, right? We start thinking about other things, start creeping into our mind. And if you've never had the experience of catching a pop fly or having that sort of phenomenological thing happen to you, just go stand 60 feet, 6 inches away from a tree, right? And try to hit it with a rock. That's like being a pitcher, right? Like how much energy and focus does it take for you, to confidently engage in this sort of SE activity, right? And it's very easy to sort of imagine yourself doing it, but actually go out and do it and see, it feels a lot different when you're actually faced and, put in the actual SE domain, right? Okay, so how does this relate to the video? So in Shade's video, he's talking about like, okay, is there sort of a simple way? Are there simple ways of just sort of deciding is somebody an E or an I or an N or an S, T or F, J or P? And and I would say yes and no, and because it's very contextual, and let me explain what I'm getting at here, because if you ask somebody, do you have a preference over sensory domain or intuition domain, or what do you use, right? Well, sometimes it might be hard to answer, because if I'm sitting there trying to catch a pop fly, I can't use my NI or my NE and make that ball, turn into a dragon or something outside of the physical domain. I am stuck in the physical domain, whether I like it or not, right? And that ball is going to come down. I'm either going to catch it or it's going to hit me in the face, or I'm going to drop it and get cut from the team. God knows what, right? But I can't just say, well, I've got a preference for NI, so I'm going to make this into an NI situation or an NE situation or something like that, right? So there are a lot of things where we don't get to pick, what we do. There are some things, though, some situations where, okay, being either a T or an F might make sense. You can approach it in two different ways. For example, let's just say you're a real estate agent and you're trying to sell a house, and you could do it in a very TE kind of way or a thinking kind of way, and try to sell it by talking to potential buyers and telling them how great the market is in that area and how great the interest rates are right now and how they're gonna the equity is going to build up really quickly over 5 years, and before they know it, they'll be a millionaire. And looking at the school rankings, looking at the crime statistics, looking at just data, right? To help the potential buyer make this decision on very TE kind of grounds. Or you could be more of an F type, more feeling type, and just talk about how great the neighborhood is, how great the neighbors are, and how so and so lives on that street, and how so and so live down there, and how you grew up, in a similar neighborhood, and oh, the school's so great, the teachers are so nice, selling it on this very FE kind of way, right? So there are some situations where you could say, "Oh yeah, I take a thinker approach versus a feeler approach," um, but I would argue, 75%, 80%, 90%, I don't know, of what we do, we really don't have a choice, right? And so when you ask somebody, are you a thinker or are you a feeler? Or are you extroverted or are you introverted? They might say, well, at work, I'm just really introverted. I tend to lock myself in my office and just, focus on my work. And I don't really like to engage in chit chat around the office. But I go out every night with my friends and we go downtown and we go, to bars and parties. And, I can't imagine spending a weekend night, alone by myself watching TV when I can be out with my friends, right? But when I go to work, I don't talk to anybody. I just put my headphones in and I focus on my work. Okay. So what are you? Are you extroverted? Are you introverted? It's very contextually dependent. And they might also say, yeah, whenever I'm around my family, I'm just real quiet because they're big talkers and, it's just so annoying being around them. They're just so loud. So I just sort of sit there quietly. But when I'm out with my friends, I have no problem talking, all that kind of stuff. And so it backs people into these weird corners where they're, it sort of depends on the context, right? And then you start getting people thinking that they're ambiverts, right? Well, I'm extroverted sometimes, but I'm also introverted sometimes. And it just sort of depends on, where the moon is or whatever. And I don't think that's the case. I mean, I think there's a much easier explanation. It's just when you're at work, and if, you're doing a bunch of TI stuff, I'll use myself as an example, the vast majority of stuff that I have to do for work is TI stuff, like sitting down and figuring out what parts of a contract go where and stuff like that. Or how do you parse this law or this regulation? Very, very heavy TI stuff. I'm not a lead TI user. I can't just, lickety split get it out. So I need things to be quiet. I need to remove myself from, distraction, noisy environment, because if I'm going to be engaging in TI, I sort of need to focus more, right? Concentrate on it more than maybe, an ENTP or an INTP would need to, right? They might be able to just walk around and no big deal to them, right? And so, so does that mean I'm introverted all the time? Not necessarily, right? Okay. And so the point being is to me, it's not about preference. It's not about am I a thinker or am I a feeler? I think we should think of him as, everybody is a thinker, everybody is a feeler, right? Everybody uses all 8 of these functions. It's a matter of how much attentional resource, it takes, and how easy or difficult is it to stay within that domain, right? So as you're sitting there waiting for the pop fly in your SE domain, how easy is it for you to just stick in, and stay in that domain without getting distracted and, moving to other domains, right? And so so sometimes it's not as easy as saying I'm a thinker versus I'm a feeler, because we all make feeling decisions, when we have to, make some sort of ethical decision or, decide I like this more than I like that. But depending on the context, But if you're given a pop fly, so to speak, in various domains, how easy is it for you to stay in that area, right? So if I give you an SI type of quote unquote pop fly and put you on Jeopardy, right? How easy is it for you to be on Jeopardy, right? And let's say you have a vague idea of most of the answers. It's just, how quickly do you come up with them? How much resource does it take? Or are you sitting up there thinking, oh my God, everybody's laughing at me? Or are you up there thinking like, that blue doesn't really go with that green, stuff like that, that's sort of shifting you out of SI, functionality, or if I, give you a pop fly with some ethics sort of decision, some FI situation, like you're a manager and you get two employees that, one of them has to be in the office at any given time, and they both want to take a vacation, and one's already taken 4 vacations, but she needs to go visit her sick mom, and the other one hasn't taken a vacation in 2 years. What do? Because FI is all about trying to deliberate and find the fair answer, right? And can you handle that pop fly, right? And if you are just sort of barraged with those questions over and over, because you work in HR or something like that, and you're constantly trying to make a decision about what's fair, or you're a Supreme Court justice, right? I mean, half of the Supreme Court decisions are about what's fair, in some sort of resolution among the parties. And how easy is it for you, to live in that domain, or give you a TI pop fly and ask you to do a bunch of logic or math problems, right? I mean, that's basically what half of an intelligence test is, just a bunch of math problems, and so on and so forth, right? So you can do them, but how easy is it? How much of it can you do in one sitting, right? So, for example, going back to the intelligence test, so the Waze test, it measures different performance in different domains, and one of them is sort of this math problem domain. They give you a bunch of math problems. It's just one after the other, and people who score well on the math part of it, they're probably lead TI, secondary TI. They got no problem processing that stuff. They could sit there all day and do it. I've seen it. I mean, maybe not all day, but you get the point. But then you move on to a different section, and it might be sort of a spatial reasoning, like, I show you a pattern and you have to recreate the pattern using these blocks. Not so easy, right? They're not firing off rapid responses, or there might be some verbal component. And, they might not be firing off as rapidly. And so that's why it tests these different domains and gives you sort of a general score, right? So you might do really well on the math part and not so well on the spatial reasoning, stuff like that. And so that's why we all sort of, end up in sort of an average. But I would argue, we're sort of clocking into different domains here, and it's really a matter of how comfortable you are, right? Because if I gave you all the time in the world to answer these questions, like an ACT or an SAT, imagine they weren't timed, right? And you could take all the time in the world to answer these questions. Everybody would probably come out with close to a perfect score, right? It's the fact that they're timing you and you're under, pressure to perform. How easy is it for you to stay in that domain, right? So, I have notoriously done poorly on the math part of, like the GRE, the ACT, the SAT. I do average. Don't you think I did horrible? But I always do better on the verbal, right? Because I got lead NI, and a lot of the verbal questions are sort of analogies, things like that. And I tend to do well, right? And so people would see my ACT scores or my GREs, they're like, whoa, what happened on the math? But on the verbal, they're like, oh, okay, good enough for me. And I would argue, people who are heavy SE users probably do really well in the spatial reasoning, all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you get the point. And so, but if you had asked me, years ago when I first started getting into this, like, are you a thinker or are you a feeler? I would have told you I'm a thinker. I've got the degrees to prove it, right? But then it occurred to me that it's like, okay, yeah, you're a thinker, but when you think, you have to take time to process it, right? So you might come up with the quote unquote correct TI answer or a good, well thought out answer, but you're not going to do it on the spot, right? INFJs don't think well or, on the spot, and so I know that about myself. And so when I'm in a situation like with work or something where somebody's asking me to give them a TI, response right now, I have gotten comfortable just saying, look, I want to look into it. I want to confirm a couple of things and think about it, and I'll get back to you tomorrow, right? And so then I can sort of retreat, let things simmer, and let the TI stuff work, right? But again, if you had asked me 5-10 years ago, are you a thinker or a feeler? I would say, of course I'm a thinker. That's what I do all day, right? But not so fast, right? And then I also think the other problem about asking people is, and this isn't necessarily what Shane was saying. I'm sort of going on my own thing here, but sometimes we do things so naturally that it doesn't occur to us that that's sort of our dominant function, right? So you might be a lead FE type, or let's just say an INFJ. You might be an INFJ and you use your TI a lot. You're very good at your TI. You've got a TI type of job, but you use your FE just so naturally, that you don't even really think of yourself as a feeler, right? Just didn't occur to you. The other thing, and Shane points this out too, is we obviously have to agree what it means to be a thinker, what it means to be a feeler, what it means to be an introverted thinker, what it means to be an extroverted thinker, so on and so forth. So, that's what all this is about, is trying to come up with some way of, defining these terms that, hopefully people could agree on. But I realize that they sort of deviate from sort of the traditional way of talking about or thinking about these things. So, okay. So I think that's about it for this video, but I'd encourage you to, instead of thinking about, whether somebody's a thinker or a feeler or an extrovert or an introvert, think about it more in the pop fly analogy, right? If you put them in an SI situation, you put them on Jeopardy, or you have some interview and you're asking them what happened at this event that you're at 2 years ago. How easy is it for them to stay in that domain and give you as much detail and as flexibly as possible, or do they keep sort of bumping out of it? So like, watch my video on Colin Farrell, the Penguin interview, where they're giving him these SI questions and he keeps, he'll give an SI response. And there's other interviews where he's much better at giving the SI responses that I've seen. But he'll give an SI response and then he'll sort of convert it into an NI type of thing, where he starts talking about the meaning of whatever event it was that he's talking about. And then he always seems to end it with an FE type of little quip or little wink of the eye. He's very Irish, and Irish people are just very FE. And I'll have like some little joke or some little, he'll make fun of himself or something, just to sort of bring things back into his comfort domain, this FE and I kind of thing, at least I would argue. Or maybe he's bringing it back to SE, who knows? But he's definitely getting out of the SI domain and then trying to bring everything back into a domain that he's kind of comfortable with. And then you compare him to the Reeves guy, who you ask him an SI question, and he literally goes on for 5 or 6 or 7 minutes giving you his SI response. And he's got no problem staying in SI, right? Now, does that make him a lead SI? I don't know, right? I don't know. I mean, he's probably an ENFP, which would make SI, fourth, but whatever it is, he's comfortable in it. So it's definitely on his front stack, where with Colin Farrell, not so much. Okay, so and speaking of, I'm going to try to do some more videos like that to give some actual concrete examples of here's somebody sort of slipping out of SI and into NI, that kind of thing. So, all right, everybody have a good rest of your day. I'll probably be back. I got some other stuff I want to talk about. So, talk to you later. Bye.